Hey everybody. So today I wanted to talk just a little bit about staffing in churches, which not always the most exciting thing, but I actually think that we're missing out on structuring churches properly now, especially now that I have this friend that he says since COVID, every single company is really a technology company. And there's a little bit of truth to that even amongst ministry and churches, because really now a lot of our communications, a lot of our outreach, things like that involves or incorporates technology in some way, shape, or form. And increasingly we're going to see it shaping, some of our discipleship practices. How do you engage people in those other 167 or so hours of the week that they're not in your church sitting in a service? And so technology has just this profound way to kind of allow you to insert yourself throughout the week. And it always has. The telephone was a major thing, right? Like when I was early in ministry, email and telephone, like that's what we were always using to pick up, call people, email people that we had talked to. And it allowed us to contact people and kind of drive ministry. Well, now we just have more and more options to work with and deal with. So what's the issue here in terms of staffing? Well, a little bit of history. Back in the day, businesses used to have, the CEO, and then they had the COO or CMO, and that's the chief operating officer and the chief management officer. They could have either one of those, or they may have both. And then a lot of times your IT department would actually fall underneath the operations officer or the management officer somewhere. And in churches, it may make absolutely no sense. It may actually fall under like operations, then it would fall under like the music director or the AV team. And then like way down the line, you might have some kind of IT guy who just manages the office and makes sure computers got updated or something, which is important. But it's not really something that you're actively engaging in to do discipleship or to outreach or do things like that. It was more of an office function. Like I said, still important to have your office function managed and managed well, because it does free you up to do more stuff. It does keep things stable. It keeps your constituents' information protected, things like that. But it's not driving ministry. And businesses kind of got that, where they kind of said, okay, well, we shouldn't leave such an important function and role way down the structure like this. And so they created chief information officers, chief technology officers, chief information security officers. And these are all people that would be on your executive team, and they would respond, or they would work directly with, the CEO, the CFOs, the CMOs. They would all kind of interact on that same level to drive the goals and the mission forward. Well, my argument would be, we've done this to some extent in churches where we said, okay, well, it makes a lot of sense to have, say, like a executive pastor, which they're kind of like a COO, they're kind of like a CMO. Oftentimes we'll have a treasurer or of some sort or something that will kind of operate as that CFO, that chief financial officer. Well, I think that we really need to start considering having a technology pastor who's up there at that same level, who responds directly to the senior pastor of some sort, so that they can no longer look at technology, information technology, as something that's part of operations, but it needs to be something that is part of overall strategy and goals. How do you use these things to do outreach? How do you use these things to do discipleship? How do you use these things more broadly in ministry, instead of it being kind of separate and often some other place within your organization? So there's a few ways that you could potentially hire or bring in or fill this role. It's a challenging one to fill, because even out in the business world, just because it's kind of rare to have people with the skills to do it. So it makes sense to keep your eyes open for it. The things that they need to be able to do is they need to have leadership experience, because it is a leadership role. They need to have the ability to think strategically, in particular to make plans and see trends. They need to have technology experience of some sort. It may be in technology project management. It may not be direct technology implementation per se, but it does help. It helps if they've got at least a general idea of how all those things work. But then they need to have that theology and that ministry background and leadership within ministry, because what I run into a lot of the time is you'll have IT people working in churches, and they're great IT people. They're fantastic, but they don't really understand how to be a pastor. And then other times I run into people who are pastors, and they just really don't understand technology. And we actually need people that can bridge that gap. And that's rare. It's very rare to have all of those skills kind of in one person. So the ways that you can, of course, get these types of people into your organization. I mean, the obvious one is to go out there and hire somebody. The challenge here is they're going to typically be pretty expensive. The people that have those kinds of skills, just on the going rate out there, you're talking medium-sized business, at least $10,000 a month that they're going to pull in because they've got those skills. Probably not going to be able to pay that kind of salary within most churches, especially not rural churches, smaller churches. It's probably not going to happen. But that's still one of those options. They are difficult to find, like I said, especially with those financial constraints that you may have. As far as time until they're kind of effective, typically, I mean, depending on their experience and things like that, it could be a year or 2 years before they really get rolling within your church. On the plus side, when you have these people, they might be the perfect person to run like your online church or church online, whatever you're going to call it. So if you've got one that's going to be full-time, you do at least get the pastoral side, you get the technology side, and you can do that. Option 2 is to outsource to a technology pastor. I'm kind of biased because this is a role that I do for various churches. The cost can vary a little bit, but it's a lot cheaper because you're sharing the cost of your technology pastor with a lot of churches, because they're going to come in, once a week, once a month, or once a quarter, and help you deal with kind of those strategic goals and overcome any kind of big rocks or hurdles that you're encountering. And oftentimes they've got a team with them as well, and they may handle a lot more of your technology estate. They may be also day-to-day managing your cloud services like your Microsoft 365 and maybe your cybersecurity, and they might be managing even your desktops and endpoints to make sure that problems don't come up. So they're handling everything on a strategic level, and that may help in terms of cost. They're easier to find because there are some prominent ones that are out there. Not necessarily the easiest to find, because there does have that tendency to be they're either really strong in ministry or really strong in IT and tech. And usually they're really strong in IT and tech and don't have a lot of pastoral experience. Like they may not have run a ministry. Maybe they volunteered in one, which is better than nothing. And if they've got a lot of experience in that can help. But you do want to try to find people that, hopefully they've been to Bible school, or they've got like a lot of mentorship, a lot of training. They know their theology. They know how to operate. They understand a discipleship track or things like that. In terms of time to effectiveness with when you're outsourcing, they're typically really fast, because once you hire them, they've done enough onboarding for churches and they've worked with enough churches that they can usually get in quite a few quick wins, and they're usually going to encounter stuff that they've encountered before. So they're looking at it and going, okay, I've seen this before at this church, or I've seen this before at this other church. And they're going to go, okay, here's the low hanging fruit that I can just bang, 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 fix and resolve. And so they're able to kind of move that way. Downside is that's not somebody that's going to probably run your online church, right? Because they're not actually your staff. They're not actually going to get involved in day-to-day pastoral things, but they are the people that you interact with and liaise with on your broader IT strategy and using technology for your church on that high level. And finally, one of the ways that you can do it is to train a technology pastor. So that's kind of how I ended up in kind of pastoral and technology, because I was one of those people that, I was initially really strong, more so in the administration and ministry side, because I'd come from doing ministry in a large church when I picked up more of the technology. I did have a little bit from my undergraduate, because I took quite a bit of computer science courses just because it kind of interested me, and didn't prepare me that well for it. It took me a long time to still pick up those skills to be able to actually do run technology within an organization, and even longer to really understand how to strategize using technology to achieve those goals and mission objectives and things like that. So this is one way you can do it. It is going to have a significant cost still. Maybe not as much as hiring somebody that's already got a lot of experience doing it. And it's going to be a little easier to find that person, because you can find somebody that maybe has they're fresh out of their M.Div, and they've got, some experience with IT of some sort. You could potentially put them in that role. Be prepared, because they are going to mess things up. So you do need to have patience with that. I messed stuff up in my early days, where every IT guy really blows up the system at least once, whether it's something really dumb like accidentally deleting a whole system, or erasing a network, or there's always one really dumb thing that every IT guy does, and you're gonna have that happen probably if you're still training kind of that technology pastor. They're gonna ruin something, but usually once that's out of their system, they're a lot more careful after that, and it won't happen again. Time to effectiveness on this is going to be long. So you're going to be looking at like a multi-year thing, probably 3 or 4 years before they really hit their stride. But on the plus side, kind of like with the other hires, they can have a lot of day-to-day involvement. They can run your online church and things like that. So it can make sense. It tends to make sense like with those missions organizations. That's how I got into it. But those are some of the ways that I see filling it out. I've seen some organizations that did have someone like on their elders board or thing like that was able to come in and do it a bit. They weren't always the most reliable. And sometimes they didn't really know enough about church technology, like church management systems or stuff like that. And so even though they're a really high level strategic guy out in the business world, they just didn't quite have the bandwidth to pick up all the particularities about church technology and how to do, as well as how ministry really works. So they didn't have quite that experience of working in a church office, running a ministry. It was a little bit more kind of business world, and so there was a little bit of a disconnect with that. But I have seen some that were doing it. It's just they also did have struggles with it because it was different enough from what they usually do. All right, so that's my proposal, is that everybody should consider trying to bring in people that can manage kind of that high strategic level of technology within their organization, whether that's through hiring or outsourcing, through training, whatever it is. This is something that we do have to start considering and looking at and doing, because there's a lot of opportunities. This we've discovered over the last few years. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities. And if you're not taking advantage of those opportunities, you're definitely going to be missing out on what you can do in terms of reaching out to people and growing the people that you do have. So that's it for this week. If this has been helpful to you guys, go ahead and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys next week.